because most of us don't see how much or think about how much it takes to get into video. So I'm going to invite Rusty Anderson to the stage. Rusty is a dear friend. We go to church together in Atlanta. Incredible father. Got 3 future golf star children, because that's what he does with them. He takes them golfing. Just incredible friend. And probably our house theologian, I would say. So y'all give it up for Rusty Anderson.
Thanks, Jay. Daniel, if you're nearby, I need your Zach track so I can get the lights to follow me. So in the next about hour or so, we're going to talk about some camera stuff, philosophy, directing, and just that whole world. But before we dive into like what cameras do we have and how do we do it and all that, I really want to stop and pause and talk about why. No problem. I think I can do it. So the why part, I want to make sure we all kind of have a good idea of why we're doing what we're doing. And so practically speaking with video, obviously there's some really obvious whys. One of them is, hey, your room's very large and people have to sit a long way away. And we want to have screens in the room, and we want to put IMAG, which means image magnification. And that is going to allow people who are far away to see tight shots of people's faces, because so much of what is communicated from worship leaders or your pastor is nonverbal. Even though they have a microphone and they're speaking through it or singing through it, so much of what they are actually trying to get across in the storytelling is nonverbal. It's their facial expressions, it's how they move their hands, it's how they interact with things around them. And so IMAG and cameras help us to make those images larger so people can see it. You also may have just like bad sight lines. So in my church in Atlanta at Passion City, it's a renovated warehouse. It used to be a Home Depot and a PGA Tour Superstore. And so you may have a church building like that, and you have columns like just scattered throughout the auditorium. And so you may have a seat where you can't see very well. And so the camera shots and the IMAG help us to give those people a better experience. So those are pretty practical reasons. And then also, everybody remembers a couple years ago when nobody was in the church building and we had to broadcast it because everybody was at home. So that you may be in a place where you're broadcasting or streaming, or you have satellite locations. So obviously those are reasons we need cameras, very practically speaking. But there's also a side to it that I feel like we often overlook, but I want to make sure that today you walk away at least being told this. Maybe you won't believe it quite yet, but I hope you will. And that is that we are, at the end of the day, I really do believe that we are storytellers in every discipline, but especially in video. And I say that we're storytellers because there is a story happening up here on stage. The worship leader we talked about in our meeting this morning, they have a journey they want to take people on, because people are coming in the doors and you have no idea what they're carrying, what they're walking in from. And so we have to take them where they are, take them on a journey, and try to get them to a place where God can speak to them and they're open to receiving that. So there's a story happening up here. And when your pastor is speaking, they said they've been working all week on crafting a message. And there's a story arc through it. They're trying to create tension when it's appropriate to create tension, and then resolve that tension. So any kind of storytelling you've studied, those are kind of the big things, right? Create tension, resolve tension. And the way that we, as video people, the way that we decide to frame something, or the composition that we choose, or the gear that we choose, all of those things can very easily, unintentionally sometimes, affect the story that we're telling. So for example, if you, probably some people here that have gone to film school, I did not, I've just read a bunch of stuff about it, but where you put the camera can subconsciously make the viewer think something or feel something. Same way that light, like color theory and lighting can do that as well. But if I put a camera shot down low and it's looking up at me, it makes me, as the person on camera, feel large, feel maybe aggressive, or feel powerful or significant. It can be called a hero shot. It can be called a villain shot, depending on the music and the lighting and all that kind of stuff in a movie. And then if I do the opposite of that, if I put a camera too high and it shoots down on me, then it's going to make me feel weak, insignificant, and like I don't have a lot of authority. So ideally, you probably don't want to do either of those that much in a worship setting. We're kind of going to be more neutral unless certain situations call for it. But there's a whole bunch we get into about that. But composition and framing all are part of that storytelling process. How we pace our cuts together, how quickly we do it, all that kind of stuff is storytelling. The other part of it is that what I really want to make sure we all believe is that we're artists. And it's, sometimes I wake up and I don't really feel that way. I don't know if I actually believe it, but we are artists in what we do. And I like to think about it this way, is that a few years, probably like 10 years ago, my wife and I had just gotten married, and we got the opportunity to go to Europe for the first time. And at that time, I was in seminary, so like I was super interested in church history and just history in general. So we went to Italy, and we went to Rome and Florence, and just a bunch of area around there, and we went to all the different cathedrals and churches that we could go to, the museums. Went to the Sistine Chapel at the Vatican. And I remember every time I would walk into one of these things, these buildings, a couple of things would strike me. One is like just the architecture of the building would like inspire awe out of me. You'd walk in and you'd feel small because everything was so massive and big, and the way the lines would like draw your eyes to certain things, they inspired awe out of me. And unfortunately, I don't know that we're building a lot of buildings these days that do that, especially in churches. Most of our buildings are probably going to be torn down in 50 years and build something else. But the other thing that when you walked in these buildings, the church, or actually the people that were building the buildings would commission artists to come in and paint the story of God on the ceiling or on the walls. And largely because people couldn't read, this was their way of getting the story of God across to the masses. But now looking back, 500 or more years later, we look at these pieces of art as like world masterpieces. These are the things that we travel to go look at and we see, and we like put them in high regard and high prestige. And all of these pieces of art were created by the church. The people who led art and culture were church people. And I think somewhere over the years, like we kind of lost sight of that. No one would probably look at the current culture and think that the church is at the pinnacle of art and the culture. But I just feel like challenged to try and bring that back. If that's our heritage, that's where we come from. So when I step into video directing and what I do and what God's called me to do, I want to try to bring that artistic storytelling piece of it back. I'm not just trying to fill a job or fill a role on a team, but I actually want to bring what God's given me and offer it back as, here's my art, God, here's the best that I can do, and let's see if we can be the best in the world at it. So that's my challenge to you guys. Hopefully that kind of inspires you to see yourself as an artist and as a storyteller. So taking that, let's talk a little bit about some of the gear that we have here at MXU on the tour. So first off with cameras, we're using, one of our awesome partners is Canon. And so we have Canon C300 Mark IIIs, that's what you're seeing right now. 2 of them at front of house, camera 1 and camera 2. And then we're gonna run 3 handheld cameras today. One of them will be kind of out in the house a little bit, and then 2 on stage, all Canon C300s. And then Canon lenses and glass on all of them. The ones at front of house are video lenses, more or less. The ones that are handheld are like photography lenses, so lenses that you would use for DSLR kind of cameras. And kind of digging into the camera part of it, I'll go over the switching stuff later when we go back to the switcher. So we chose Canon cameras for a few reasons, and one of them is that we wanted to be a cinematic type of video. I hear that term thrown around a lot. It's a hot button issue right now. How are we cinematic? How can we be cinematic? And so I want to go over a few ways that what it means to be cinematic when you're talking about video. So these cameras are it's a larger sensor camera. So inside the camera body, there's a sensor that actually captures the light, turns that light into a video signal that we see. And so a traditional broadcast camera is a smaller sensor, whereas a cinematic camera like the Canon C300 or a bunch of the manufacturers these days are Super 35, or you may hear the word full frame. And it really just means it's a larger sensor inside the camera. And what that larger sensor does, a few things. Generally, they're better in low light. So in like the way that Daniel was lighting things earlier, there's not a ton of light on stage, but that's okay because we have cameras that can handle that. And then the second, probably the biggest thing it allows you to do is to have a shallow depth of field. And so a depth of field is any kind of camera that has a lens on it, you have to tell it how far away from the camera you want to be in focus. So I don't know the distance right now, but let's say we're 35 feet or so from the cameras. The lens is set in a certain way that the focus plane is right here where I'm standing. So a cinematic camera, because it has that larger sensor, will allow you to have a shallower depth of field. So if I were to move up and down the stage quickly, you would see that I would go out of focus. So for example, let's go to on a tight shot of me. Can that one get any tighter? Let's do a live zoom. Perfect. So you'll notice that the words behind me are a little bit out of focus. That's because we have a shallow depth of field. So keep the camera still. I'm going to walk backwards, and you'll see that I'll get out of focus as I go back, and I'm getting softer and softer. If this was a broadcast camera, that I would have a way more latitude in where I could go and stay in focus. There's good things about that, so that if you have a lot of movement and it's hard to track focus, or think about if you're doing sports and you're trying to follow a golf ball through the air for 300 yards, it's nice to have a focus plane that's a little bit deeper so you can keep it in focus. One of the downsides is that if your focus plane is too deep, like in a broadcast camera, and let's say your stage is shallow, we have a nice deep stage here. But if you have the wall in focus, you could start seeing some issues with LED walls. So take the focus wheel and slide it back to the wall for me, whichever camera this is. There you go. There you go. That right there, that's what I want to see. So that's called moire. The camera is having trouble with resolving all the different pixels on the LED wall, and so you're seeing this crazy waving stuff. If you see that, with different cameras, it's because the wall is in focus, and so if you have a broadcast camera, sometimes the person's in focus and the wall is in focus, and it gets hard to create that separation. So this helps us in small places create the wall to be out of focus and keep our subject in focus, and helps the viewer know what to look at. Another thing that could be cinematic, a really obvious one I think that people miss on, is how you light things. Daniel hit on this a little bit, but if we just do a bunch of flat front light, it's never going to feel cinematic. If you go to any kind of movie shoot, they will set up all day, get the lighting right, spend hours on getting the lighting right just to shoot a 30-second scene, because lighting is probably the most important part about a cinematic look. And what I love about the way Daniel lights is all these lights on the ground that create side light and backlight. All those angles create dimension on the face, dimension on the body, and so you get that cinematic look. And then another, often people want to talk about frame rate when they talk about a cinematic look. So right now, we are in a 1080-60, basically. 1080p 5994 is the frame rate that we're running at. And you see that what that means is it's literally taking 60 pictures every second. And so when I do hand motions, it's pretty crisp. There's not a lot of blur between those that movement. But if this is camera 1, I want you to look over to the left side of your camera. There's a button that says 8 on it. And if you can press that button for me, just press it and let go. There we go. So now you can see as I move, maybe that looks a little jittery. That's because now the camera, with the push of a button, and a lot of manufacturers are doing this, the new C300s can do this, it's making it look like a fake 24. So the switcher and everything that is down the chain still thinks it is actually still a 5994 image, but the camera internally is making it look like 24p, or 24 frames per second, which is the frame rate that most movies are shot at, and everything you watch on TV for the most part, cinematically, is shot in this kind of frame rate. And I like to show it in this example because when you A/B it, when you go from 60 to 24, it's pretty jarring. Would you agree? That's kind of weird, right? Like, why would I ever want it to look like this? And I would probably say, in my opinion, for talking heads, for sermons, or this kind of setting, it's probably not the right way to do it, because it does feel a little bit jarring and jittery. But I love it for worship. And the reason I like it for worship is because it literally is creating motion blur between every frame. When you walk into Best Buy and you see all these TVs on the wall, they all have this setting that gets rid of all the motion blur. And I don't know why we're doing it, because it's really the wrong way to go. People that make movies do it this way for a reason. But I want that motion blur to exist so that as we're, it helps. I believe it helps make the viewer feel a part of something. When you go back to the 60p, it's so sharp and so crisp, it almost feels a little bit not real. It's like a soap opera. A lot of people call it a soap opera effect. And this is just a more aesthetically pleasing way to do it. So what I'm going to challenge you on is that when we come back from lunch later and we do the worship set, we're going to run it in this mode. And my bet is that because I told you, you're going to know it. But if I hadn't told you, you probably wouldn't know because you only can really tell when you go from 60 to 24. So what I like to do is run worship like this, and then as we transition away from worship into like a hosting moment or something, I'll cut to a wide shot, or maybe you go to a full screen graphic, and then you switch all the cameras back to 60 or 30 if you're doing 30 frames. And then that way it's sectioned off. You have a section at 24, and then the rest of the service at 30 or 60, and it's not so abrupt of a change. So we don't have to keep looking at this. Go ahead and push that button again and put it back in 60. Perfect. The last thing I want to talk about cinematic real quick is movement. Camera movement is one of the most important ways that we can get more of a cinematic look. So if you were to watch a music video, for example, they're not going to shoot a music video with 5 tripod cameras. That's just not how we do it. There's more handheld motion. If it's like a concert music video, there may be a lot of dolly movement, which is a camera on a track that's moving. Could be Steadicam movement, or Movi, which is like a gimbal that helps keep the smooth motion. Handheld, jibs, wire cams, all that kind of stuff is creating movement with the camera. And one way to think of it is, I think cinematic movement is something that's more natural. So a camera can move a lot of different ways. It can, like I just said, dolly. It can move backwards and forwards. It can tilt, pan, all that kind of stuff. And all of those I can do with my eye. Those are all natural human movements. The one that I can't do is zoom. Unfortunately, I can't take my eyeballs and zoom them in or zoom them out. That's the only one that's like not real. So when I'm trying to create a cinematic look, I'm going to zoom very little. My zooms are going to be very, very super slow, and we'll do this in a minute as we train camera operators, but I'm going to try to do super slow zooms so that it feels like you're not even totally sure you're zooming, but it's creating some energy and some movement. And then try to create more of my movement in different and more natural ways of moving the camera. Cool. I think that's pretty much all the stuff that's cinematic I want to talk about. It's not just buying a certain kind of camera. It's really the whole picture and deciding what's best for you guys. And I would also say that if you're in a setting where it's like big choir and big stage and orchestra, some of those techniques aren't going to make sense. You probably could do the frame rate. You could probably do shallow depth of field, but I don't know that a bunch of handheld shaky cameras are going to be the right call for you. So it really is trying to find what's right for your culture and for the place that you call home. All right, so while I'm up here, we do have a worship set to do this afternoon, and unfortunately on the MXU tour, we do not travel with camera operators, so that means I need some help from some of you guys. So I need Jeff, if you're ready, to help me find some volunteers. Let me give a couple disclaimers.
Yeah.
That if you're going to volunteer, you have to come back this afternoon, because do not be that volunteer that doesn't show up. Don't do that to me, please. We all know what that feels like.
This is a planning center request that you may not decline.
Yes. And you will also, we'll have to do some rehearsal during the sound checks this afternoon. So if you're like, no, I only came here for the audio portion, maybe this isn't for you. But I promise you'll get to experience most of it too.
This is actually my favorite part of this event, because we have an opportunity here to give some people who've never been behind a camera a chance to get some practice and some experience. But who in the room is a senior pastor, executive pastor, senior staff? Okay, I see people pointing at people, but I don't see anyone raising their hand. Where's the point? Okay. Sir, what's your name? Justin? Come on up, Justin. So,
Justin.
This, just for all of you, for all of you who have in the back of your mind, if my senior pastor only knew how hard it was to run a camera. Today we're going to find out, which is great. So, thanks for being willing to participate. I could tell you were 8 people pointing at him. He's just sinking lower and lower in his seat. So we're going to put Justin on one of our stick cameras. I don't know if he'll want you on one or two, but you'll be at a tripod, okay? And hopefully you'll never complain to your video team again about.
You're assuming that he does that.
I'm not assuming. I'm just, there are trends in the business. We'll just say that. Okay, so who else? We got a couple of volunteers. How about you, sir, in the blue shirt? Come on up. And then, let's see. I'm just, it's like a magician looking for a volunteer. How about you, sir? Come on up. And one more. Let's see.
I want to know what's going through your head, Jeff, as you're walking past people who have their hand raised.
It's just,
what are you profiling people? What are you?
You know what? We've already got 4 because I said blue shirt and we had 2 guys in blue shirts.
So we actually need 5 today.
5
I switched
today.
it up. We're
going to
have it a 5th one.
Okay. Holding up a Dallas Cowboy shirt is not going to get you anywhere with me. I'm sorry. Where are our production females in the room?
Yeah, let's get some representation.
Let's get some representation. Don't make me do it. Don't make me do it.
What are y'all's names?
I think you should. Come on up.
Justin, Andy.
What's your name? Lauren. Okay, we've got Lauren and Justin. Did you get everybody else's names?
I got Justin, Andy. What's your name? Mike, Bryson.
And this is Lauren.
And Lauren. Justin, Andy, Mike, Bryson. Wait. This is tough. Justin, Andy, Mike, Bryson, Lauren.
Awesome.
So I will do my best to know your names, but when you get on a camera, you're just camera 1, camera 2, camera 3. All right, so I need 2 people to run tripods, and I need 3 people to run handheld. I don't have a particular preference. If there's one that you would like to do, let me know. Okay, we got Mike wants to do handheld.
I'll do handheld.
Handheld, great. Who wants to do tripod? I would rather tripod. All right, so we got Bryson on tripod. Andy, why don't you go do? Justin, sorry. Justin, Bryson. I'll have you guys walk back to cameras 1 and 2. Back there. We're going to give you comm, and you'll be hearing from, for now, you're hearing from Jeremy as a director. You can also listen to me. We're going to do some live training. And you three can do handheld. So we got 1 on stage here, 1 on stage over here, and then 1 is on the front of the stage, and I'll explain later where that will be, but you guys can spread out, go to those. We're going to do some tripod training first, and then we'll come back and do handheld training. But if you want to go ahead and pick one up, let's try to get familiar with it. That's great. So Mike gets up here behind near Monitor World. All right, so obviously on normal Sunday, hopefully you're not training 5 brand new people how to run camera. And I'm assuming these guys have some experience, so we're not starting from scratch. But I don't know. These are not plants. I don't know any of them. So let's see. Once we get in place back there on camera 1 and 2, we're going to go over some quick things on tripod. Give me a thumbs up when you feel like we're at least in place. All right, cool. So I've got, over here's camera 1, Bryson, and Justin, thank you. Camera 2, over here. So I want you guys to, first off, let's just follow me as I walk. You just kind of get loose. When you walk up to your tripod, there's a few things that are important to know. There are hard locks on it, and so when you walked up, it wasn't locked. But if you ever come up to it and it's like, this thing's not moving, there's on the tripod head, which is the part of the tripod that's above the legs, below the camera. There are locks on that. So if you ever walk away, it's a good idea to lock it so you don't come back 2 hours later and the thing's tipped over and everything's broken. So there's locks and there's also drag. The drag is what creates a friction when you move the tripod. So whichever camera we're on, 1 and 2, both of you can kind of just feel how it moves. If it ever feels like this is too loose, then you need to add drag. That's on the pan and the tilt. If you feel like it's too tight, like I'm fighting it, then you need to lessen your drag, or lessen the friction. And the goal is that it feels like you're able to move smoothly and do on-air moves, meaning when you're live on screen, you can adjust without it feeling abrupt or feeling jerky. Now, a couple tips for that is never, ever, ever, ever take your hands off the tripod. So if I'm the pastor and I'm sitting down and you take your hands off the tripod, when I do this, you have to react instead of anticipate. So I want you to have your hands there so you can always anticipate instead of react. I don't want you to grip it like a vice, because then it's gonna, every time you breathe, it's gonna feel like every move that you make is gonna transfer into the camera. So we're gonna have kind of light fingertips on it, moving it around, and following the pastor. Some the actual physical parts of the tripod. So your right hand is a zoom controller, and if you can go ahead and play with that. It's okay if you're doing it live on screen. Let's talk about headroom real quick. All of this space is kind of wasted space. So I would say put my head more at the top of the frame. So tilt that camera down. And I would probably already say that's already feeling a little stiff, so we'll work on that drag later. But go ahead and keep tilting down. Keep going. Somewhere in that area. I want to let my eyes line up on that. If you were to cut the screen into thirds, my eye would be on that top third line, somewhere in that zone. All right, so on your right hand is your zoom. So as you turn that knob, it'll zoom in and zoom out, and the how hard you turn it will determine how fast it zooms. So both of you, I want you to go ahead and spin it all the way to one side. Spin it to the other side. You can kind of see it's already in a pretty slow mode. Now, if we're doing live on-air moves during worship especially, like I said before, I want those to be super, super, super slow. So kind of practice just barely spinning that wheel or that rocker knob until you can get used to those really slow movements. I would say probably even slower than that. And it's just one of those things, it's muscle memory. The more you do it, the more you understand. You barely are going to spin it. Then as you are zooming, you have to adjust your headroom. So if you're zooming out, you got to be tilting down so my head stays towards the top. And if you're zooming in, you're going to be tilting up so you don't zoom in and cut my top of my head off. On your left hand, there's a focus servo or focus controller, and that allows you to tell the lens what to focus on. If you spin it the way that it's currently set up, if you spin it forwards, the focus will go upstage. If you spin it backwards, the focus will go downstage. So it follows the way that you spin it. Super helpful tip for volunteers to know, like, hey, the wall's in focus, so I need to spin it towards me to get the person back in focus. Now, also, these are video lenses, and so these are they have a feature called parfocal. And what that means is that you can zoom all the way in, so both of you go ahead and zoom all the way in quickly as you can. Maybe up here. And this is fun. So zoom all the way in, get your focus. And hopefully the monitor has focus assist turned on, so it should outline, once my body's in focus, it should outline it in red or some color. And then now you can zoom out. And as you zoom out, I will remain in focus as long as I stay right here. If I move somewhere else, then I won't be in focus. But that's called parfocal. So on a broadcast lens, when people are changing shots a lot, I train people to zoom all the way in, get your focus, and then zoom out and get your framing, and you'll stay in focus. On the lenses on our handheld cameras, those are photo lenses, the stage ones are, and those are not parfocal. So most photography lenses are not parfocal. So if you zoom in, get focus, and then zoom out, it will not be in focus anymore. The focus is actually, the mechanics inside the lens are changing. All right, so I'm going to just walk a little bit and see how we're following. So you notice how I got to the edge of the frame and started getting cut off. I don't ever want that to happen, because that makes everybody out here feel like someone was late or someone was falling asleep. So you're gonna have a small target in the center of your frame, and you're gonna follow as I follow. You're gonna use body language cues to help you. So if I turn my body language this way, you're gonna know that I'm gonna start going this way. And any other speakers or pastors in the room, don't do this. Don't do that. got a lot of people trying to watch online and watch in the room, and we're doing our best, but give us some slack. But I will say, because of things like that, I'm kind of saying that tongue in cheek. I'm never going to tell my pastor not to do that, because he may be doing some sort of illustration where he needs to have that energy and have that, that kind of nonverbal stuff I was talking about earlier. So I'm going to have a camera set up with a wider shot. So I think probably right now, this is probably camera 1, and then camera 2 would be head to toe, perhaps. So when I say head to toe, my feet at the bottom of the frame, my head at the top of the frame. And I'm going to have that shot ready for any of those faster moving shots. So instead of having 2 cameras with the same framing, I'm going to have them look different so that I can tell the story of what's happening on stage. So I'm going to have a tight shot for those intimate moments where I want to see their face, and I have a wide shot for the more faster movement kind of shots. Real quick, different ways to frame up the body are pretty natural. You can do like a armpits up, or a bust shot would be like from here to my head. Elbows up, waist up, knees up, head to toe. There's natural markings on the body where you can frame it up. So I would, when we're doing this later and we're actually running cameras, I'll say things like that. Hey, give me a waist up shot. And that means waist at the bottom and then head at the top, or a knees up, or head to toe. Those are the kind of language that I'm going to use. You guys feel good about that? You ready to work camera at the Oscars now? I think that's pretty much it for tripods. Oh, no, one thing. So, we talked a lot about cinematic movement. If you'll notice, I've got 2 tripods and 3 handhelds. All these handhelds are going to have natural movement to them. They're holding the camera, so they're going to have a little bit of shake, because there's no way you can hold it perfectly steady. And as I'm going to train them in a minute, we're going to have movement in all the shots that we do with handhelds. Well, if I cut from a bunch of moving shots to static tripods, it really sucks all the energy out of my video cut, and none of it feels like it's cohesive or it matches. So I'm going to create movement with the tripods. I can't physically move them in XYZ space. I can't. They're anchored to the ground. But I can do zooms. So we talked about really, really, really slow zooms are one way to do it. That's just the way that I would generally do it, my style. And the other way that you can pan and tilt the camera to create movement. So to make sure we're clear on that real quick, camera 1 and 2, if I say pan right, what do you think that means? Hey, good job. That means lens to the right, which means your hands actually went left. That's the confusing part about that. So pan right means lens to the right. Pans left means lens to the left. Tilt up, tilt down. Those are quick directions that I would give you. But what I want you to work on right now is during worship, I want you to have a moving shot all the time. And the way I want you to accomplish that is, so let's start out with like a waist up shot. And I want you to figure eight the camera, so to speak. You're going to act like it's kind of floating. And I don't want you to literally figure eight it. That's just it's just a way to put words around it, but you're kind of going to have random movement and keep it moving the whole time. So if I was here singing and I had a guitar, and imagine the music is playing, if it's fast music, we're going to move a little bit more. If it's slow music, we're going to move really, really slow and subtly. So let me go ahead and I'm going to watch as you go ahead and practice that. We're getting there. Right now, it feels like you're moving, stopping, moving, stopping, moving, stopping. We want it to feel more fluid the whole time, which probably means we need to play with the drag setting on the tripod, perhaps. And right now, as you're watching this, it looks ridiculous. No offense to you. It's just, there's no music playing. Why would you do that? Later on, when we're actually doing this for real, notice how it fits in better with the handheld movement. And imagine that I'm only on this shot for 3 seconds, and then I'm cutting away from it. So I'm not going to sit there and make you watch it and get dizzy. We're going to do it tastefully. But I want you guys to keep that in mind. You're going to have that, especially camera one. You're going to be on our worship leader for every song. We'll talk more about that later. But I want you to have that kind of floating movement going the whole time. Just kind of, great. We're going to work on smoothing it out. I still think that's too stiff. But what that's going to allow you to do is, kind of like when I said before, if the pastor's sitting down and you kind of take your hands off of it, then you have to react. In a worship setting, if you're constantly moving, you're able to react more smoothly. So if I'm a worship leader and then I raise my hand, you can naturally follow my hand up and get it in the shot because you're already moving the whole time. All right, let's give those guys a break. They've been doing a great job, though. Let me just do some handheld stuff real quick. Mike, if you want to come over, I'm going to grab this camera from you. So, a couple of things I want to talk about is just how to hold the camera. I'm going to walk out here just so everybody can see it. So, a quick physics lesson. Everything, the farther away from you it gets, what happens? Heavier this becomes, right? So this may only weigh 10 pounds. Out here, it weighs about 35 pounds. It gets really heavy. So if I'm constantly holding the camera out from my body or up high or bending over and doing it down low all the time, the whole thing's going to get heavy and start to get shaky. So I train people that this camera has a nice grip. I'm going to put my hand in there and keep my hand on it very stable. I'm going to also then tuck the back of it into my chest. And I can do it up high for a shot, or I can do it down low, but I'm also always going to try to have it anchored to my body. That's going to help me keep it stabilized. Then I'm going to take my left hand and hold it under the camera, under the lens. What that's going to allow me to do is this ring that's closest to me is my zoom ring, so you can go ahead and take this camera live. We'll let everybody online see the crowd. Nope. That one. Perfect. So I can have my hand on the zoom ring and do quick zooms, and then I can also change focus because my hand is on right here under the lens. So that's how we're going to hold the camera for the most part. Again, there's a place to hold it like this, certain situations, but I'm going to encourage people not to do this a ton because then it gets heavy, it shakes, the thing starts getting crooked. And we have Dutch camera shots instead of level horizons when we don't intend to. So it also allows me to, on this particular camera, guys, your right index finger has a dial right on top, and that's how we're going to control our iris. So I can make things darker or make things brighter. So like we hinted at earlier, you guys are in charge of your iris. I don't have control back at front of house, so I'll help you kind of get an eye for it, but you're going to be controlling your own iris. All right, so now that we know how to hold it, let's talk about how to move it. And this applies to all you guys. So as I'm doing this, you guys can practice this in your positions. I'm going to hold it nice and tight to my body. And then I'm going to create movement by moving my hips around. And it feels awkward, but no one's going to see you because you're wearing black. Hint, hint, should have wore black today. But I'm going to create movement just it can be as simple as just rocking back and forth on my heels, on my feet, moving my hips around, but kind of keeping it moving the whole time. I can go up and down. I don't know if you can see this, but this shield is causing a lot of problems. So I'm going to have to get creative and maybe go on this side of it. It's because it's a round shield. Everywhere I go, I see me. You're going to have to play with angles probably like that, like you normally wouldn't do. I don't know if you can see that, but trying to avoid seeing yourself as much as possible. But the biggest thing here I want us to keep in mind is that we're constantly moving. I'm not going to stand here and hold a camera like this. If that's the shot we wanted, then we shouldn't have asked you to come serve today, because we could have put that on a tripod and just left it here. I want you to have movement going the whole time, changing your zoom levels. You could be on the snare drum, up to the drummer's face, moving it to the toms, up to the cymbals, back and forth. If I'm on a guitar, it's the same thing. Always moving on their, thank you, Mike. Could be on their face, down to the guitar, swaying back and forth, following them. It could be a tight version of it, down to their guitar, and back up. The biggest thing is to always keep it moving. So even over there, I know it's going to feel awkward, but let's go ahead and keep movement over there. So go ahead and walk up to the keys. And give me some movement shots. So I'm going to watch it. Yep, trying to get your focus. Great. It's hard to imagine now because there's no music. But when the band gets out here, we're going to rise and fall with the kind of energy that they're bringing. So fast songs literally could be as much as walking around the drum kit on a fast song. And then on slow song, it's going to be more standing on one spot and just giving it some sway. And if you see right here, see how those backlights are sparkling? That kind of stuff's awesome. So always look for backlight if you can. And we have a lot of lights on the floor that are going to help with that kind of stuff, but creating that kind of sparkle is just eye candy. That's great to have. All right, I'm going to give this to you, Mike.
Thank you.
You can go ahead and practice all those things we just talked about. Real quick, this is camera 4 and camera 5, I'm going to talk about where you can go and where you can't go. I only have a few rules. Basically, is don't ever get on an instrument riser. No real reason to do that. That's their space. I don't want to risk. It's not worth the risk of knocking a mic over or unplugging something. So stay on the floor. But it's okay to get up close to it. And then for the guitars, same thing. It's okay to walk up in front of these lights. And maybe it's, on the downstage side so I can see the front of them. I'd rather see the front than the back for obvious reasons. If you're going to do a reverse shot, meaning like you're upstage shooting towards the crowd, I usually like to tilt up on it. So you can go ahead and practice that, Mike. I would say tilt up, basically trying to hide this stuff. So tilt up. You don't even really need to dip. You could just move it up. Yeah. So, and then try to get those lights in there. That's great, because they'll probably have their hands up. Those kind of shots are great. And you zoom it out wide. Let me see what it looks like. Great. It's a way to kind of show off the room a little bit. So, I would probably say for you, I'm just going to look at this stage. I probably wouldn't cross this line, because then you'll start getting in the background of our other cameras and you'll just be in the light. And same over here, I probably wouldn't cross these cables. Try to stay on that side. All right, and Lauren, right? Cool. So you have a different angle, you're on the floor. What I would love to try is for you to, I'm gonna anticipate that all these people sitting down front, they sat down front because they're like big worshipers and they love raising their hands and being engaged. Right? We're going to do that. So I want you to actually walk down that aisle. And that cable, we'll have to work with that. We'll get that straightened out and cleaned up later. But for now, just walk down that aisle. And let's imagine everyone is standing up between you and me. And I just want you to kind of look for windows to shoot through. And you're going to be getting shots that are probably a little bit wider like that, and then I don't know how tight you can get with that lens. Great. So you have your own iris control as well, I believe. Cool. So you're just gonna work that aisle and find little windows to shoot through, and there's gonna be a lot of people blocking the front part of it, and that's what we want. In that example that Daniel showed earlier of seeing people worship the silhouettes, that's what I'm looking for. It's gonna make the viewer feel like they're actually in the room. And what we'll probably do is we'll work with that same kind of camera movement. And if we feel like you can't, get the right shots, we also can walk down front and get here in the pit area and get closer shots of where I am. The only thing I would probably give you tips for is I wouldn't shoot the front of people's faces. We're not really lighting for it, and I don't want to put the front of someone's face up on the screen and then get distracted and then be self-conscious the whole time that someone's filming them. And also, I don't know if they're going to pick their nose or yawn, and I just don't want to risk it. So we're going to shoot the back of people's faces and their bodies and try to create the same kind of movement and energy that we've been talking about. Cool. Any questions from you guys so far? Feel good? All right, I'm going to walk back now and talk about the switcher and some directing stuff. You guys are feel free to keep playing with the cameras, keep getting comfortable. Now I can hear myself, and that's weird. All right. So I'm going to try to do this and talk to you at the same time. All right, so back here, normally I would definitely say do not put your switcher in the middle of the room. Because as we'll see later, this is going to be loud, and it's going to be hard for people to hear me. And video directing is all about communication between me and the team. So in an ideal place, in an ideal world, you're in a back room, you're in a quiet space that you can control and have more say over the volume of things. But for the sake of this today, we want to be out here so you can kind of see how it goes. I am working with a Ross Ultrix Carbonite. I'll show you the overhead. And what this is, so it's a Ross switcher, and it's kind of overkill for like what I would need on a normal Sunday. It gives me a lot of things that I can do. If you're doing like multiple cuts, where you want like the room and you want broadcast and you want a bunch of different looks, this thing has all the horsepower to do that. But for the worship set, all I'm basically going to use is these 5 cameras, and then I have a ProPresenter source that I can use for lyrics on top of the video, and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that is like all these kind of cameras that we're using for the MXU thing. But for the actual worship set, I'm basically going to live in this world right here. And I've mapped it out the way that that makes sense for me. So there's this long going joke between some of us about what should be on button 1. You should put on button 1 whatever you want on button 1. It really doesn't matter to me. I like to have camera 1 on button 1 just because the way that it makes sense in my head. So when I'm directing, I like to keep my eyes up on the multi-view. And if I have to, to me it's kind of like playing Guitar Hero. I am not musical, but I can shred on some Guitar Hero. And the whole reason is because you just put your hands in one spot and you just memorize mostly. It's just hand-eye coordination. So that's the way that I kind of do it. I always keep my pinky on camera 1, and I don't have to look down because I know that the first button I feel is camera 1. That allows me to keep my eyes up on the multi-view, and then I'm just going to live in this world. I might cut on the program bus, which is up here. So as I push these buttons, things change immediately. And then, or I may work from the preview bus, which would change things in my preview, and then I could push the cut button to take it live. Over here is a bunch of keyers. So keyers are in switcher world. This is a video mixer, right? So there's a base layer of video, and then keyers are things that you can stack on top of it. So I can stack lyrics on top of that. Or if you're earlier when we were doing this kind of stuff, these boxes are keyers that I'm stacking on top of the video. So it allows me to create those different kinds of looks. And then over here is where I'm deciding how I want to do my transition. So I can cut, I can do a push button dissolve, or a wipe, or whatever else you want it to do. And that can be at a preset amount of time. So for example, that is a 15 frame dissolve. Or I can grab the T-bar, and you can do this, but just be careful because this starts to get real awkward. So it's there if you need it, but and what we're going to do today with the upbeat music and there's a ton of movement on stage. If I have a lot of handheld cameras that are moving, so let's go ahead and try this. So there's camera 3, and I put camera 4 back there. If I do a dissolve, that just gets super busy if they're all moving at the same time. So I'm going to do cuts to keep it clean. I think a lot of times I used to feel like cuts were just abrupt, but the more I watch TV and music and just things in general, cuts are the most used transition. Dissolves generally are used to express some sort of passage of time or scene change. So there's a reason to use a dissolve, but today we're going to use just all cuts. Unless we're dissolving into or out of a graphic or video, then we'll do a dissolve. But yeah, other than that, anything I forgot here, Jeremy? The way that this works is this is just a remote control. There's a frame that has all the inputs and outputs coming in and out of it, and I can assign what I want to do. So I could do down here, this is my projector cut, and I could do up here my broadcast or my stream cut, and I could have this one follow this one until I want to take a wide shot, and then I could do that up here. Just a ton of flexibility. But when we talk about actually directing, a few tips that I want to make sure we go over, and I want to talking to my camera team. Directing cameras, more so than audio or video, is a team sport. It is of all the things that we're doing here, is the most team-oriented thing. And no offense to a lighting guy, but you have to have a ton of talent and artistic ability, but you tell the robots what to do and the robots do it. Audio guys are, hopefully, musicians are been rehearsing and they've been practicing, and they show up ready to go, and you have to take those sources, hopefully, but good sources, and make them into a beautiful mix. For me, when I show up, I've got the accountant who hasn't touched a camera in 3 weeks, and now they're showing up to run camera again, and so on and so on and so on. And so I can only create something as good as what my camera operators are giving me. And so a lot of that's on me. I have to make sure I'm training them well, what we just went over. Hopefully you do that in more than just 30 minutes. But I'm training them well. I'm also communicating super well and super short, easy to understand commands. So like we said, I'll say things like pan left, pan right, head to toe, waist up. I'll make sure we're all on the same page with terminology, and so that you can get the shot that you need to get. Now the other thing is because we're a team and we're all dependent on each other, we have to do the job that we need to do. So I've heard this analogy 1,000 times probably, but so in football, thank God football is back, right? Sorry for you guys in Austin. It was rough last week. I'm sorry. As a Georgia fan, I was rooting hard for those Longhorns. But the quarterback has to do the quarterback's job, right? The quarterback can't do the wide receiver's job. The wide receiver has to do the wide receiver's job. And that's the mentality that I'm going to have as we're directing this afternoon. So camera one, you are going to be on the main worship leader. And so that may mean that it's John Sal sometimes, it's Jenna sometimes. But you're going to be on the worship leader, and you're not going to deviate from that. And that could feel like, hey, it could feel boring, or maybe it feels like I'm not very creative. But I would challenge you that you can be super creative inside that box. If I were to let you shoot whatever you wanted and let everybody shoot whatever they wanted on the stage, I would wind up with 5 unusable shots 50% of the time, because people would be wandering around looking for shots. I'd have camera 4 on stage right, spending a whole minute trying to get over to the other side of the stage to get a drum shot. And so when I'm thinking about my camera plot, I want to put things in places so everyone can accomplish a role, and then all of those roles put together can be the full video cut. So camera 1, you're going to be on the main worship leader, and I'll help you know if that's Jenna or John Sal. But that's all you're going to be. And so when I'm directing with my normal camera operators, I trust camera 1 to be in that position so much that I will take camera 1 without even looking at the multi-view sometimes, because I know they know that's their job and that's where they're going to be. Camera 2, since I already have the worship leader on camera 1, whoever's leading that part of the song, your job is going to be, in our setup today, since we have 2 main worship leaders, you're going to get the other worship leader, and that's who you're going to live on. But that doesn't mean the same shot every time. It could be waist up sometimes. It could be head to toe sometimes. It could be a wide push. It could be a tight, slow pull. There's a bunch of different framings you can do within that little box, but I want you to kind of live in that box. Camera 3, we kind of talked about it. You're on the house right aisle, so you're going to focus on that side of the stage, mainly on John Sal or Jenna. They'll kind of move around a little bit, but you could also get that bass guitar on your side a little, some too. Camera 4, you're on by the drums, I believe. Yes. So you're on the drum side. You're going to focus on the drums, and then there's a bass guitar downstage. And those are your main shots. I don't need you to worry about the keys or the electric guitar, because that's too far away for you. Just focus on those areas and be thinking about different framings you can do of all those different, of the drums and bass guitar. And you're just going to cycle through all those different kinds of shots, keeping movement in it the whole time. In camera 5, you're on keys side. So for you, it's keys. Don't worry about drums. And then you have electric guitar downstage in front of you. So that's going to be a super important shot as well. And then both of you can work on some reverse shots and just kind of following what's happening on stage. One thing I love for handheld cameras on stage to be looking out for is you kind of have to have your eye in your camera, but also have an eye looking around. And if you see someone like raising hands, or they're just like, I have a drummer at our church sometimes that will like hit the snare with one hand and like hand up with another. And I love capturing that kind of stuff because it's just engaging and it invites people into worship. So those are our different roles. We're going to stay in those roles. And if you know that and I know that, it's going to help us to create something beautiful and great in the storytelling part of this, even though we haven't worked together before and maybe you've only been holding a camera for 30 minutes. And then one other quick tip I wanted to go through is talking about pacing and choosing cameras. So we are broadcasting today, which is a little different because we haven't broadcasted the previous two. And I would imagine most of you guys are broadcasting on a weekly basis. And so if I only show tight shots on a broadcast, for the viewer at home, it really is missing a big piece of the storytelling process. Because Daniel has spent, and his team has spent a ton of time creating lighting looks that work with the songs and the energy. And if I don't ever show that, then the person at home doesn't get to experience what that has to offer. So they're missing the context of what's happening. So I do have a PTZ camera in the back of the room that we've been using a lot. So I may use that for those moments where I need a wide shot. And those would be, I'm thinking like at the hit of a chorus or at the downbeat, like when the bridge gets big, or those hits that we were hearing earlier when the lights were flashing. I want the viewer to experience those same things. So I may cut to a wide shot so they can see the light sweeps, or they can see the lights making those hits, or they can see the LED wall content change. That's kind of an important thing. If you're in a tight shot and the content behind them changes, it's kind of the viewer doesn't really know what that is. And so backing up, giving wider shots to show context is super helpful for the storytelling that we're going to do. So yeah, we'll have that available when we need it. And then I think lastly, I want to talk a quick thing about pacing. So if I am in the middle of a song, one of the things that I've realized that I do is that, I know that very intentionally, when we get back to a verse, I want to get to the face of the worship leader. So that's why I'm going to go to camera one when I get to the verse, because the lyrics are, arguably the most important thing about the worship that we're saying. So I want the viewer to see the worship leader say those lyrics to help them hear it and understand it and sing along to it. So can we actually put up some worship lyrics? Oh, great. So when we get back to I Know, I want to get back to camera one for our worship leader. That's not like a hard and fast every time rule, but that's a general rule of thumb for what I'm trying to do. Now, I will ask you, for those of you that have any experience being a pro presenter, when would you change that lyric to go to the next slide? I can't hear the melody in my head to know what this song is, but anybody thoughts? I can't hear, sorry. On the last word? At the beginning of the last word? Maybe 2 words before, some people are saying? I would say, yeah, that in general, you need to change that slide way before the viewer is going to sing it, especially if it's a new song. So you're going to hit the next slide at keep or your, or at the first consonant on covenant. And the reason being, because you want them to be able to see the next line so the brain can read it and they can sing along. Well, when I'm directing, I'm going to kind of follow that same model. I'm going to stick on a vocal for I Know That You Will Keep, and then I'm going to go to a drum shot or a guitar shot or some sort of instrument shot at the end of this line, your covenant, so that I can get back to the vocal at the beginning of the next line. And that depends on what part of the song we're in. If the next line is coming up immediately, maybe I won't do that. But I'm not going to, that's what I'm going to try to do instead of waiting until the last syllable of covenant to go to the drum shot, because then I'm on a drum shot when the next line starts and the people can't see the person singing it. So that's my general rule of kind of the pattern I'm trying to follow, and I think you'll be able to see that later. So cool. How much time do I got left? 11 minutes. I'm trying to think of other directing kind of patterns to do. It's one of those things that's hard to like. Actually, I don't have like a written down ways that I do it. It's just trying to fill out the song, listening for those wide shots. If you were to close your eyes and listen to a song, and imagine if you were lighting this song, when would you do the big hits? When would you do the light sweeps? So I'm going to try to go wide for those moments. When does it get slow and more intimate? I'm going to have tight shots ready for those moments, and so on and so on. So I feel like that's good. Any questions for my camera operators? You guys feel like you have a good understanding of what we're going to try to do this afternoon? Great. I'm excited. I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to struggle with the drum shield, not seeing yourself in the reflection. But that looks good. If you go wide, you're probably going to see yourself more, so you may have to be a little bit tighter like that. Great. All right.
Rusty, you got time for some questions?
Hit me.
Nathan from Dallas says, can you give me some examples of when you would use a dissolve cut during worship? Would you ever use them during a worship set?
I wouldn't say never. I think if I were going to do a dissolve, I might do it at the beginning of a song or something like that to try and kind of reset the viewer's palette. So I may dissolve to a wide shot to kind of express, hey, we're going into a new song or something is changing. One of the main reasons I don't do dissolves a lot is because it requires a whole lot more directing of traffic. So if I'm doing a shot, let's use Jay as an example. If I put Jay on camera 1 here live right now, and I put camera 2 in
How do I
preview.
look?
You look great. Where do you get a shirt like that?
Thrift store.
Amazing. If I dissolve right now between camera 1 and camera 2, especially if I do it slow, you get like a weird face morph. You got little head, big head intersecting each other. And so that's going to require me to do a whole lot of communication. Either my camera ops have to know to adjust so that like right now camera 1 is live, so camera 2 would have to put Jay on the right side of their frame so that I can bring them in and have some space. And while I do that, camera 1 maybe is moving them off to the other side. That's just a lot of language, a lot of communication, and usually where I come from, we're not rehearsing that much to get enough time to really do all that. So I would say in that scenario, if I would rather just do a cut than have those kind of awkward transitions that are distracting to people. So yeah, that's probably how
Nathan Smith from Tyler asks, would you be against using PTZs in a worship set?
I'm not against it if that's all that you have. But here's what I would say. If you say, I want a cinematic look that looks like XYZ Church, and they're not using PTZs, and all you have is PTZs, then you can't accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. So if you're in a place where you have to use PTZs, then you just need to direct in a way that accentuates what they can do for you. So they can do zooms, they can do smooth movements, but it's not going to be this kind of style that we're going to be doing this afternoon. But I do think you could mix them in a little bit. The hard part is just getting movement. Like you could never do our floating thing that we're going to do with a PTZ. So I would use them, but I would just figure out the situation I'm in. Do they make sense? Do they not make sense? If I'm going to spend a bunch of money on a PTZ and I could spend a similar amount of money on a handheld camera, I would choose a handheld camera. But it's not always apples to apples.
Matthew from Oklahoma City asks, would you ever recommend using the white bar? In what scenario and how fast?
Say the wipe bar?
Yes. I don't know what that
I
is.
think what they mean is this.
Whoa. It's kind of cool. Could you do half and half?
You sure can. Hey.
Hey, buddy.
I can't think of a situation in which I would use it. I mean, there may be some like, yeah, maybe you have some sort of like movie theme sermon series going on, and you wanted to do a Star Wars Zoom. Like, there could be a place for it. Would I do it in worship? No. Would I is there possibly some scenario in which that would make sense? Sure. There could be a place where that makes sense, but
I saw this a few times, Rusty. People ask, what is the process for lyric overlay from ProPresenter? We are currently using a magic box, but we are limited to bright colors and not blacks or dark colors, or our switcher will key them out. I don't know what that means either.
yeah, I can tell. So the way that we are currently doing it is we have a Blackmagic Ultra Studio attached to the computer. It's over Thunderbolt.
It's not a ROS device?
That particular piece is not. Yeah. Anyway, out of the back of that, there's actually two distinct SDI lines. And so one of those lines is carrying, I don't know if I can show it very well here. One of those is showing this signal, which looks like a black background with white lyrics. And then I don't think I have the alpha source. If you can find it, Jeremy, you can put the alpha source up there. But the other one is showing the information that you want to get rid of. So what this you're looking at right now is actually just white lyrics. That black does not exist. It's actually a transparent background. I just don't have anything behind it, so what it looks like is black. The other signal is the inverse of that, and it's what you want to delete or cut out of the signal. So when you put those together, if I take this camera shot and I turn my keyer on, I keep the black box. I have a little bit of transparency, behind it, because it's actually an alpha channel, is what it's called. And then everything else is cut away. So this is the best way to do it if you can do it. It requires two different inputs into the switcher, but with this way you can do shapes, you can do any color you want to do. The question was probably from someone who's doing a chroma key or a luma key. That's when you can only send one signal into the switcher. And so in this scenario, back to this, what you would do is you would cut out the black signal in this switcher. And so that's a different keyer type. Oh, sorry, what did you have it? You would have a different keyer type that cuts out the black. Oh, there we go. There's the alpha channel. So it looks a little different than that one. So the switcher is doing all the work behind the scenes to do it. So if you are having trouble with it, you need to choose a color that is not in the rest of your graphic at all. And then make sure that your graphic doesn't have any green in it, for example. Or if you're doing black, if you're keying out black, you cannot have a black box around your text because you're getting rid of it. But an alpha key is the best way to do it.
Great. Got a few more questions and we'll wrap it up. Gear question. What is the distance from front of house camera to stage, and what lens are you using on the C300?
Great. I did not go over that. So I don't know the distance.
It's like 20 feet.
Okay, you said 20. Adam said 60.
Yeah.
Let's go 30. 40. I don't know.
No, it's 60 for sure. You're right.
So it's a Canon, so again, C300, and then the lens on this camera 1, is a 25 to 250. And then camera 2 is a 70 to 200 compact servo, both from Canon. So they're different intentionally. If I had the same lens, they're also very different prices. One of them is, I don't want to say something, but one of them is significantly more than the other one. So if I don't have enough budget to get the same one, then I can be creative, and so that camera 2 can't get wide shots, but it can get tight shots. Camera 1 can get wide shots and tight shots, and I can work with that.
Elijah, from Georgetown, we have 2 stationary cameras. We often get those waves from our LED screen. How can we fix that?
What was the first part of the question?
We have 2 stationary cameras.
Okay, so it depends. I don't know what kind of camera you have, but the reason that you're getting the waves is because the person that you're shooting on camera is too close to the LED wall. So when you put this person in focus, the LED wall is also in focus. So what you need to do is either create separation physically on the stage, so move your wall back or move your person forward, or both, or you need to run your camera at the most open aperture it can be. So your camera lens needs to be at like f2.8 or f3 or f4, something that's super bright. So if I were to go to this camera, if I iris this camera up and then I gain it down, that's going to give me the shallowest depth of field that I can get. the more that I close the aperture and gain up, the deeper my focus will be and more things will be in focus.
2 real quick questions, Rusty. Well, maybe your answers aren't quick. How to color balance if we have 3 brands of cameras?
You can't. The best you can do is to get a chip chart. I would contact your local video vendor, see if they have one, see if someone can come help you. But you're gonna have a chip chart which has all the colors on it. You put all the cameras and you shoot it at it, and there's a proper way to do it. And then you just need to dial in the cameras to get them as close as you can. But different sensors by different manufacturers have different color science, and they will never all match the same exactly.
Caleb asks, how do you feel about running cameras wireless using something like a Holy Land transmitters? Are they called Holy Land transmitters?
I don't know that brand. Holy Land?
Holy Land.
Cool.
I'm just spiritual.
I think wireless cameras can be great. It depends on. I just want to make sure they work in your situation. So in our church in Atlanta, we started out with Teradex, and they worked during rehearsal. But when the room filled up, they didn't work because wireless signals don't transfer as well through bodies of water, and that's what we all are. So if you can get them to work and work well, it's great. We chose to have a more stable signal and tether them by a cable. And so we lost some flexibility on where we could go, but we gained it's less distracting. Camera's not going to go out. We're not going to spend a bunch of time teching it every Sunday. So I would say if it works, great.
Great. Last question. Do you work with the lighting director to have them light for the stream, or do you make adjustments primarily on what the LD does? Who is the pace setter?
I don't think I can answer that in a global way. It depends on, in your church, you have to decide which audience takes the priority. And during COVID, that was easy because there's no one in the room to take priority. So now that we're back and we're doing both, there has to be a conversation. One from leadership is, hey, who is our top priority? That doesn't mean you can neglect the other one, but it helps you phrase the conversation from moving forward. And then you can say, okay, well, if the room is our top priority, what can we do to compromise to make the web stream or the broadcast usable? And there's things you can do with key light color temperature is one of the big things. And the second thing would probably be balancing the key light intensity to LED walls. So if you're in the room, a bright wall looks incredible. It's super engaging. But if I turn this wall brightness up to 100%, you won't be able to see Jay anymore. I don't have enough key light to compete with that. So I think right now this wall is at 15% brightness. So it's a compromise.
Y'all give it up for Rusty Anderson. I learn something new from Rusty every time, and I don't know how that's possible. We're going to go to lunch here in a second, but I want to remind us of a few things. One, the partners that we have out there, this is a great time to connect with them real quick. If you would like to see the broadcast truck, Tony is out there at the Lavo console, and he said he could take you for a quick minute as soon as this is over for anyone that wants to see the broadcast truck. There are a million giveaways out there. Waves has that QR code, 4Wall, Yamaha, IPS is giving away a Yeti backpack. Anyways, just check them all out. There's so many giveaways out there, but I would like to give away one more thing. Who here is a vegetarian? That's my sentiment. Clearly I'm not. We have a vegetarian? Do I see a hand? Oh, back right. Cool. Do you grill your veggies? I would love to give you a D&B grilling set. Jeff, if you don't mind grabbing one. You're going to have to come get it from Jeff. He can't walk that far. I'm so sorry. But it's got a coffee mug in there too, if that makes you feel better, from the lovely folks at D&B. Oh, did I dodge the tracking system? Ooh, like a ninja. Okay. When you guys come back, I want you to text all your friends, get on the stream. When you come back, if you guys are at home and watching the stream somewhere down here, under the stream, you'll be able to click front of house, monitors, broadcast, lighting, or video when we get to that portion, which would be super great. Separate audio feeds and video feeds. And so check it out. Wave, Sennheiser, PreSonus, Allen Heath, Crewbrew, 4Wall, Yamaha, Chauvet, D&B, Rowe, Earthworks, Mike Rentals, Lavo, Church Gear, Act, Sardius, Resi, Stealth Chair, Ross, Digico, Cargo Drop, 64, Canon, Shure, SSL, M Forecast, DC Pro, Skylark, IPS, Summit, Amplia. We all give them a round of applause. We could not do what we do without them. They've been incredible. Who traveled the furthest to get here? Kansas City. Okay, is anyone not from America? Where did you travel from? Okay, that's a lie then. We're in church and everything. So everyone's from America. Okay, let's do this. Who is under 21? Great, you can't come to the after party. I'm kidding. Who is under 20? Keep your hand up. Who's under 19? Who is 18, under 18? Who is under 17? Who is under 16? Are y'all skipping school? Homeschool, oh yeah, always, yeah, clapping for skipping school, I like that. My kind of people. Under 16, under 14, under 15, that comes next, right? Yep. Oh, under 14? You're 14? Y'all are 14? Okay, great. I am, okay, then tell me this. How many of y'all are audio guys? Audio, great. I'd love to give you a microphone today from MikeRentals.com and Earthworks. It's right there, and Marcos will get it to you. He's got the white headphones on. You can go ahead and go get it. Tell me your name. Ethan. Let's give it up for Ethan. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, I'm sorry, Jay. I've just got to interrupt you for 1 second. So
imagine that.
I met Ethan this morning and his brother, Joe. They were the first ones in the room, 16 and 14. When I met Joe, he was shaking my hand and he said, "This is Ethan, he's my brother, he's our audio director." I'm like, 14, audio director. Okay, cool. Well, these guys have been sitting in the front row taking copious notes the whole time. I mentioned it to Rusty earlier. He said he had met Joe, and Joe had asked him the most thoughtful, interesting questions he's ever heard. So if you're raising up young people on your team, raising up young people in your church, kudos to you. If you're not, there's an Ethan and a Joe in your student ministry right now that you can bring alongside you, make them a part of your team, and raise up the next generation of production leaders. These guys are awesome. Thank you guys for being here. I love that you're here and so engaged. This is just so cool.
Okay, Ethan, will you promise me one thing? Well, promise me two things. Well, three. Skip school as much as you want to come to MXU. 1. 2, will you start a podcast using that microphone? Inspire people your age. And then 3, will you come on our podcast with us sometime and talk to us? That'd be awesome. I'll give you my info when we leave. I'm excited. Okay, who came by themselves? Awesome. You lovely people around them, take them to lunch. Charge it to your church budget. Tell your executive pastor I said it's just fine. Let's be back here 1:10. I want to start right at 1:15. You guys that are watching the stream at home, we have some exclusive behind-the-scenes content coming your way. Let's be back here 1:10. We're going to knock it out. It's going to be a great afternoon. Y'all have fun.